Alright, welcome back. This is going to be part 1.5. It was supposed to be part 2 of 2, but we didn't actually finish the fairing on time. So the next installment you're going to see how to finish the front of the fairing, marry up the bottom to the top, as well as put the flange in the back. So in this episode we'll fill in the top fairing a little bit, and then we'll make the bottom fairing as you see here. Here's how we did it, version 1.5. So starting off to measure the bottom fairing here, I measure 5/8 of an inch down from the horizontal stab and the fuselage, and then use the 1/8 inch fine line tape like you've seen before, where we want the fairing to finally end up. Now I just use some Gorilla Tape to create the fairing shape that I want here. There's no need to use foam in a small area like this. Just make sure for the Gorilla Tape that you attach it to the previous piece before you smooth it out, otherwise it tends to make bubbles. And I just use some foam in the front for the shape of the fairing. It's probably wiser to use some putty in this case here, but foam is all I had. So it works fine. Just carve it, cut it with a coarse file until you're happy with the shape. And then I'm just going to cut it away from the top fairing just to make sure it doesn't stick when we pop it off. Get the fairing out of the way, and now we can start shaping our bottom fairing. I'm just going to go back with the coarse file, remove about 1/8 of an inch or 3/32 of an inch, because we need to make room for 4 layers of carbon fiber and fiberglass here to marry up with the top fairing. And we'll just tape off the back so we have some kind of structure to lay the fiberglass against, and our aluminum tape on top of the foam. And once we've got it all waxed up, we're going to put 1 layer of fiberglass just to separate the carbon fiber from the aluminum. 1 piece at the front, 1 piece at the back, and then a 2-inch strip along the bottom of the horizontal stab. And this piece here is a little bit long that we'll trim with scissors once it's all in place and we've worked the bubbles out of it. Now we're going to go in with the carbon fiber, 1 piece on the front leading edge, 1 piece on the back, and then about a 2.5 inch wide strip. And then we soak that nicely with epoxy, trim it all up as required with the excess, and then add our peel ply to all of it once it's nice and impregnated with epoxy. We let that dry 24 hours or so, then go back and pull the fairing off. And the beauty of working with fiberglass and a layer of carbon fiber is now you have that rigidity, so we can take it back to the workbench and finish it up on the workbench. Remove all the tape that's no longer required. Now we'll go back to the workbench and add 2 layers of carbon fiber. So just doing a rough trim here with tin snips. It's easy to cut because there's only 2 layers of cloth here. Do wear a glove, however, because it makes it very sharp. And then we use that green tape, 15/16 inch wide, put the fairing back in place to get us kind of a rough idea of where the final trim line is going to be. and then we'll cut a little bit more off. We're not trying to get to the final dimension here, we're just trying to cut off the excess before we put 2 layers of carbon fiber onto it. And you might need a Dremel to cut the curved surfaces. Now we're ready to start laying up our fiberglass. Here I'm just getting rid of some of the peel ply that didn't come off cleanly, so just use some sandpaper and get rid of it. So there's the 2 pieces there, nice and rigid from the carbon fiber. And now we're going to lay these out on top of the paper that's been waxed, and we're going to add 2 layers of carbon fiber to each piece. Mixing up our West System epoxy. And just wetting the part nicely so that we get a nice bond between the old carbon fiber and the new piece that we're going to lay on top. And we're just going to work it in, cut around any edges where we need it to lay flat. And then we're going to go in and make sure that we get that nice and impregnated with the epoxy all the way around. Working out the bubbles as you go, and then laying up a second layer on top of this. Second layer on. Nice coat of epoxy on top of that, and then the peel ply. And we'll rinse and repeat that for the second part on the other side. And for the peel ply, it might not sit flat in all areas, so you might have to cut around it. Anytime you're doing fiberglass, you sacrifice a pair of scissors because they're going to get coated in epoxy. And once that's all done, we're going to go rip the peel ply off. We're going to grab the Dremel tool this time because it is a little bit thicker. You should be able to see where the final trim line is because that 1/8 inch tape will have created a little bit of a ridge. But again, here we're just trimming off excess. We're not trying to get it perfect into the final shape that we want yet. So just enjoying a 360 camera video from up high. And we're going to use some existing holes in the horizontal stab and the fuselage to attach the fairing. So this one here has a 632 nut plate already installed in it. So we'll just measure 2, 3, 4 inches away from that. And then we get a nice accurate way to lay our ruler out where approximately that hole ends up being. And the interesting thing about 6/32 inch nut plates is that you can go in with the number 40 drill bit and actually cleco into the nut plate. Same thing for an 8/32 nut plate. You can drill the hole number 30 and go in there with a number 30 cleco and it will hold it in place. So we're just going to start it with number 40, and there you can see I cleco right into the nut plate, which is kind of nice. And then take it off back to the workbench, enlarge it to number 27 bit on this case, clean it all up, and then deburr it with the deburring tool so that our Tinnerman washer and our number 6 screw sits nice and flush. So there it is, sitting nice and flush. Probably one of the things that we didn't do very good on the last fairing is it's quite thin along the edge, and you get a lot of puckering around where the screws are. This one's a lot more rigid, much better fit. Now going into the filling, if you use the peel ply, this actually ends up being surprisingly easy. There's a few voids that we found, but really just trying to make it smooth, getting it ready for primer, and then sending it off to the painter. Just trimming along the back and then along the horizontal part where the horizontal stab ends and the elevator stops. I'm going to go in with the UV Smooth Prime, cover the whole thing with 2 coats, let this dry for about 15 minutes before you add the second coat. This is going to fill in a lot of the really small pinholes, and the ones that are big and need to be filled with micro balloon are going to be a lot more visible because they'll end up being black. So a couple layers of this, some sanding, and then some micro balloon, and should take care of most of the pinholes that you have. Here's the second layer. See, it goes on a lot better after the first one dries for about 15 minutes. Now putting the bottom fairing in place, I've trimmed it so that it's going to go around the top fairing, but it's not going to be pretty right now. That's going to be something we'll show you in the next episode. But just trying to get the clearance and then clecoing it in place so that we can put the green tape on and measure where the final cut's going to be. So we got the green tape on there, 15/16 inch wide. Like I mentioned, we'll go ahead and trace that. And that's going to be the final cut, the final size that we want that bottom fairing to be. And we'll just use a Sharpie pen here, measuring underneath the horizontal stab, measuring the side of the fuselage, that's also measuring where it ends up right before the elevator starts. And doing the same thing we did on the top fairing. We use existing holes in the side of the fuselage here. Measure 2, 3, or 4 inches down so that we can drill into the bottom fairing. But we are going to use one rivet hole from the underneath of the horizontal stab, so we'll just drill that out. We'll mark that the same so that we can drill into the bottom fairing. So I'm going to leave you guys with that there. You'll see attaching the bottom fairing here in a second. Just want you guys to comment on the audio of this video. I've put 3 small effects on it, so hopefully it sounds a bit better. And we get rid of some of the popping noise from the voiceovers in the previous one. Disregard the third effect of having the flu for the last 2 weeks, and also change the technique of recording into the microphone a little bit. So 27 days until we leave for paint. So I hope you guys like, subscribe, build yourself something, and take it for a rip. Hope this helps your project along. Really helps if you subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you on the next one.